The little boy had no voice. He couldn't call for help. He couldn't dial 911. He couldn't walk up to a neighbor and say, "Something is wrong." He was just a child, small, vulnerable, completely dependent on the one person in this world who was supposed to protect him above all others, his mother. But instead of protection, he got pain. Searing, unbearable pain, the kind that leaves marks not just on the skin, but on the soul. And then, when it was done, when the screaming had stopped and the damage had been inflicted, she covered it up. She hid what she had done beneath diapers and socks. She looked at her injured child and made a calculated decision, not to get him help, but to get herself out of trouble. This is the story of Laneasha Walker, an Ohio mother charged with 3 counts of child endangering. This is the story of a little boy who suffered in silence, and this is the story of how, ultimately, the truth refused to stay hidden. Let's go back to December 2025, Cincinnati, Ohio, a city that, like every American city, holds within it the full spectrum of human experience: joy, hardship, community, and sometimes unspeakable cruelty happening behind closed doors. Laneasha Walker was a mother. She had children in her home. To the outside world, to neighbors, to anyone who might have passed by, life in that household may have appeared ordinary, unremarkable, just another family in just another house on just another street. But nobody knew what was happening behind those walls. December 12th, a specific date, a date that investigators would later circle in red, because on that day, according to court documents, something monstrous occurred. Laneasha Walker allegedly took hot water, scalding, dangerous, devastating hot water, and poured it over her young son. Think about that for a moment. Really let it settle in. This was not an accident. This was not a pot boiling over. This was not a moment of carelessness. Pouring hot water over a child is deliberate. It requires a person to make a choice, to pick up a container, to position it, to pour. Every single step is a decision, and every single step in this case, prosecutors allege, Laneasha Walker made consciously. The little boy, whose age has not been publicly released and whose name we are keeping private out of respect for his dignity, suffered second-degree burns over 10% of his body. 10%. To give you a sense of scale, 10% of the human body is roughly the equivalent of the entire arm or both legs below the knee. Second-degree burns mean the damage went beyond the surface of the skin. They mean blistering. They mean raw, exposed tissue. They mean agonizing, relentless pain, the kind of pain that makes adults weep and beg for relief. This was a child, and his mother, according to investigators, did not take him to the hospital. She covered his burns with diapers and socks. Let that image burn into your mind because it is important. It tells us something critical about the mindset prosecutors allege was at work here. This was not a woman overwhelmed with guilt who panicked. This was not someone who froze in horror at what had happened. This was someone who looked at her burned child, looked at his wounds, his suffering, his pain, and began to strategize. She thought about concealment. She reached for coverings. She made a plan. Diapers and socks. She hid second-degree burns with diapers and socks. And then she lied about taking him to the doctor. Court documents reveal that Walker allegedly told people she had brought the boy in for medical treatment, when investigators say she had done no such thing. She constructed a fiction. She maintained that fiction while her son's burns, untreated, uncleaned, unmonitored, remained hidden beneath his clothing. Days passed. We don't know exactly how many. We don't know exactly what those days looked like inside that home. But we know what untreated second-degree burns mean medically. They are at high risk for infection. They are at high risk for complications. Without proper wound care, without antibiotics, without pain management, without professional medical oversight, a child with burns like these is in genuine danger, not just of suffering, but of losing his life. And yet, the days passed, and still he was not brought to a hospital. What finally changed? What broke through the wall of secrecy that had been built around this little boy's pain? We don't know every detail of how it happened, but we know where the story turned. Cincinnati Children's Hospital, one of the most respected pediatric medical facilities in the country, a place where the doctors and nurses are trained not just to heal children, but to listen to them, to look at them, to see them. When this little boy was finally brought to Cincinnati Children's, the medical professionals who examined him saw something that immediately raised alarms, something that told them this story was far more complicated and far more troubling than a simple injury. They found old burns and new burns. Old and new. This is one of the most chilling details in this entire case, because old burns don't just appear. They tell a story. They are evidence of a history. They say that this child had been hurt before, that whatever had happened to him was not a single isolated incident, but part of a pattern. The new burns from December 12th were bad enough, but the old burns, those silent, scarred witnesses on his skin, suggested that this little boy had been living with pain and concealment for far longer than anyone had known. The medical staff did what they are legally and morally obligated to do. They reported their findings, and from that moment, the wheels of justice began to turn. Investigators from local law enforcement took over, and what they uncovered, piece by piece, built a picture of what prosecutors would come to charge as a deeply troubling pattern of child endangering. First, they obtained text messages. In the digital age, our phones carry our confessions, whether we intend them to or not. Text messages are time-stamped. They are specific. They show what a person was thinking, who they were talking to, what they were saying in the immediate aftermath of an incident. Investigators say the texts they obtained were significant. The details of those messages have not been fully released to the public, but the fact that they became part of the evidentiary basis for Walker's arrest tells us they were damning. Second, investigators gathered witness statements, people who knew this family, people who had been in and around that home, people who may have seen things, heard things, noticed things. In cases of child abuse, witness statements are often the thread that pulls everything apart. A neighbor who heard unusual sounds, a family friend who noticed a child flinching, a relative who asked questions and received answers that didn't quite add up. We don't know exactly who spoke to investigators in this case, but we know that people did speak, and what they said mattered. Third, and perhaps most powerfully of all, investigators spoke with the boy's siblings. Children notice everything. They're often the most honest witnesses in any investigation because they don't yet fully understand the concept of strategic deception. They don't calculate what to say to protect themselves. They just tell you what they saw, what they heard, what happened. And siblings who live in the same home, who share meals and bedrooms and daily life with a child who has been hurt, those siblings can tell investigators things that no text message and no adult witness can provide. What the siblings said is not fully known to the public, but again, their accounts were part of what led investigators to make an arrest. And that arrest, months after December 12th, finally came. Laneasha Walker was taken into custody. She appeared in court on a Saturday. Facing her were 3 counts of child endangering under Ohio law. 3 separate counts, which suggests that prosecutors did not view this as a single incident, but as a sustained course of conduct, a pattern of behavior that endangered this child's life and well-being on multiple occasions. The judge set her bond at $75,000, and the court issued an order. If Walker posts bond and gets out, she is not permitted to contact the victim. Not by phone, not in person, not in any way. The child whose burns she is accused of inflicting, whose suffering she is accused of concealing, he is, by order of the court, protected from contact with her. Think about what it means that such an order has to exist. Think about what it means that a mother has to be legally prohibited from contacting her own son.
The very existence of that order is an indictment. It says, in the coldest and most formal language of the law, this child is not safe with this woman. Now let's talk about something that this case forces us to confront, because stories like this one, and they happen with terrible regularity across this country, always raise the same painful, urgent question. How does this happen? How does a child end up with old burns and new burns before anyone intervenes? How does a little boy get hurt in December and not reach a hospital until some unknown number of days later? How did the people around a child, neighbors, relatives, community members, even siblings living in the same house, not get help sooner? The answer is complicated and it is uncomfortable, because the truth is that child abuse is designed to stay hidden. It thrives in secrecy. It relies on the fact that what happens behind closed doors is invisible to the outside world. Abusers are often deeply invested in maintaining a normal-looking exterior. They intimidate, they manipulate, they control the narrative. They ensure that the children they hurt are either too young, too frightened, or too dependent to tell anyone the truth. And they use ordinary objects as cover. Diapers, socks, a child's everyday clothing becomes a tool of concealment. The very things meant to keep a baby warm and clean become instruments of a cover-up. There's also the terrible reality of what investigators call delayed disclosure, the pattern where abuse is not reported immediately, either because the victim cannot report it, or because those around the victim are themselves afraid, confused, or caught in complicated webs of loyalty and fear. In this case, the boy's own injuries, old burns found alongside new ones, suggest that whatever was happening to him had been going on for some time before the medical community could intervene. When Cincinnati Children's finally saw this child, they saw the full truth that had been hidden from everyone else, and they acted. That moment, a doctor examining a small body and seeing the layered evidence of repeated harm, is, in this story, the turning point. It is the moment when the silence broke. Child abuse physicians are a remarkable and heartbreaking specialty. These are men and women who have dedicated their professional lives to understanding exactly what trauma looks like on a child's body. They know the difference between a bruise from a fall and a bruise from a fist. They know the difference between an accidental burn from a stove and a burn that was deliberately inflicted. They know how old a wound is. They know when a story doesn't match the evidence. And in this case, what they found did not match any innocent explanation. Old burns, new burns, a history written on a child's skin.
The medical team became, in that examination room, the little boy's first true advocates. By reporting what they found, they set in motion the investigation that would eventually lead to Laneasha Walker's arrest. They gave investigators the foundation they needed, and combined with the text messages, the witness statements, and the testimony of siblings, that foundation became a case. Let's be clear about what Walker is facing. Ohio's child endangering statutes are serious. A conviction on multiple counts can mean significant prison time. And beyond the criminal consequences, there are the family court implications, custody, parental rights, the long-term question of what becomes of this child and his siblings going forward. The legal process is still unfolding. Walker has appeared in court, bond has been set, but as of now, the full resolution of this case lies ahead. What we know is this: a little boy was hurt. He was hurt badly enough to suffer second-degree burns over 10% of his body. He was hurt in a way that left old scars alongside new wounds. He was hidden from medical care. He was covered in diapers and socks. And he was failed, allegedly, horrifically, indefensibly failed by the person who brought him into this world. And now the world knows, because the truth always finds a way out. Maybe not immediately, maybe not the way we wish it would, but eventually, through a doctor's trained eye, through a sibling's honest words, through a text message that couldn't be deleted fast enough, the truth comes out.
For this little boy, the road ahead will be long. Burns of this severity require ongoing medical care. They can leave permanent physical scars. And the psychological wounds, the damage done to a child who has been hurt by a parent, who has learned that the person who was supposed to be their entire world is also the source of their greatest pain, those wounds can last a lifetime. He will need advocates. He will need caregivers who are safe and loving and consistent. He will need therapy and patience and time. He will need people who look at him and see not a victim, but a child with a future worth fighting for. That is what we owe every child who survives what he survived. Not just justice in a courtroom, not just a verdict, but genuine, sustained, compassionate care. This case is also a reminder, a stark, painful, necessary reminder of why mandatory reporting laws exist, of why we train teachers and doctors and coaches and childcare workers to recognize the signs of abuse, of why organizations like Cincinnati Children's Hospital have entire departments dedicated to child abuse intervention. Because the adults in a child's life who have power and access and expertise are sometimes the last line of defense, and in this case, they came through. If you are watching this and you know a child who might be in danger, a child who seems withdrawn, who flinches at touch, who has unexplained injuries, who seems afraid at home, please act. You don't need to be certain, you don't need a confession, you just need a concern. Call your local Child Protective Services. Call the Childhelp National Child Abuse Hotline at 1-800-422-4453. Make the call. Be the turning point in someone's story. Because somewhere right now there is a child counting on an adult they may never meet to notice that something is wrong, to say something, to do something, to refuse to look away. This little boy in Cincinnati, he made it to Cincinnati Children's. The doctors saw his burns. The investigators heard his siblings' voices. The text messages told the story that his mother allegedly tried to erase. And now, Laneasha Walker sits charged with 3 counts of child endangering, with a $75,000 bond and a court order keeping her away from the child prosecutors say she hurt. The case will continue through the legal system. There will be hearings and evidence and arguments and ultimately a verdict. And whatever that verdict is, whatever sentence is handed down, whatever the court decides, nothing will undo the pain this little boy experienced. Nothing will give him back the months he spent hiding beneath diapers and socks. Nothing will erase the old burns that told investigators this was not the first time. But justice, when it comes, means something. It means that what happened to him was seen, that it was named, that it was taken seriously by the full weight of the law, that the community around him refused to let it pass unremarked, unpunished, forgotten. For a child who had no voice, who could not call for help, who could not tell anyone what was happening to him, having the justice system speak on his behalf is not nothing. It is, in the most profound sense, society saying, we see you, we believe you, what happened to you was wrong, and we will fight for you. That little boy deserved better from the very beginning. He deserved to never have known pain like this. He deserved to grow up safe and loved and warm, without hiding his wounds beneath layers of cloth. He deserved a mother who protected him. He didn't get that. But he got something else. He got the doctors at Cincinnati Children's who refused to look away. He got investigators who did their jobs. He got siblings who found the courage to speak. He got a legal system that, however imperfectly, however slowly, moved to hold his alleged abuser accountable. And now he has our attention, the attention of every person watching this, the attention of a community that has been reminded once again that the most vulnerable among us are counting on the rest of us to pay attention. Pay attention, speak up, make the call, because every child deserves to be seen, before the burns, not after.